This is Carlos Aliaga for the online radio show Lejos de la Multitud, and today I'm talking with Danbert Nobacon, who between 1982 and 2004 was part of the British anarco-pop group Chumbawamba. They were identified with the peace punk movement of the mid-80s, but their sound was always evolving, and later on they incorporated elements of folk, a cappella, hip-hop, and electronica. In 1997, they got a global hit with the single Tap Tamper that made a lot of people categorize them as a one-hit wonder, ignoring their earlier releases and the ones that they did before disbanding in 2012, I think. I remember. Danbert now lives in the USA, in the town of Twisp, in the state of Washington, if I'm not wrong. He has
Yeah.
done some solo recordings, and in 2024, he released a double album with the Axis of Dissent called, I hope that I get the pronunciation right, Kochtopus Garden. Now that's what I call Capitalism, the musical, available in digital and physical format. The music is very eclectic, and I was very happy to discover that it includes collaborations of former members of Chumbawamba, Bob Wally, Maeve Mills, and Neil Ferguson. Danbert, thank you so much for being here today with us. And I would like to start asking about the ideas behind this album. From what I read, it could be described as a sci-fi musical from the future, but we live in such dystopian times that it seems like today's news.
Yes. So if it is the future, it's the very near future. Probably the next 4 years or more. Uh, I finished recording it in early 2023. Is that right? Yeah. And it's no, we mixed it early 2024, and then it came out digitally in May. Uh, and I have lived in the US for 17 years now. And when I first came here, I didn't understand the sort of the real mechanisms that were, that American politics functions by. And I read a lot of books. You can see books behind me everywhere in my house are books. And funnily, the British music press said about Chumbawamba, I think in the 1990s, they read too many books as a criticism. But we thought, well, we read books, that's cool, and we put that into music. And this album is very much that. It's very heavy on the lyrics. I try to make poetry out of political science, and as has been witnessed in the recent election in the United States, it's really a war between billionaires as to who can, control which party. The cost of the election, I think the presidential election alone was $5 billion, and then another 10 billion for the all the down ballot races, the senators and the representatives.
Wow. So you did this recording before the election of Trump. Suddenly we are in the middle of a change between the Biden administration and this new one. And I remember that you went on a small tour playing before the election. I remember. And did you have, based on what you saw, what you heard, did you have the notion that he might win by that margin?
No, really. I thought, everybody, all the commentators were saying it was going to be razor thin close. Uh, and, that is partly because, Biden, even though he won the popular vote by, I think, 5 million, he only actually won the election by 40,000 votes in three swing states. And that is because the system has been so crafted to make it close, and it just hinges on the swing states. Here in Washington, it's Democrat, and it has been for a long time. And in effect, other than counting towards the popular vote, it doesn't really mean that much other than, okay, it's a safe democratic state. and it comes down to 5 or 7 states. And even though, initially the Trump was always won by a lot, but as they, especially on the West Coast where I live, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to count all the votes. I don't know
Yes,
why.
yes,
So the actual margin he's won by is not that much anymore. I mean, it's more than Biden. And because we have this system, the Electoral College, where it's a very outdated system and it favors the states with less population, and it just needs to be abolished, I think.
yes, yes. I was
Uh,
talking about that with John Langford in the last interview I did, and about that of the margins. If I remember correctly, one of the last tallies, I don't know if that's the word, the counting, said that Trump won by the same amount of votes, of popular votes, that Hillary Clinton lost. So
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So
it's so many. I don't understand all the intricacies of the electoral system in the USA, but I think that it really needs to be changed or abolished, as you said.
yeah, and
Um,
since sorry,
Go on.
since uh the right wing kind of billionaires, and most of them are right wing, at least economically. They basically, it's a system of legalized bribery, and the album talks about this, and they buy politicians and they buy judges, and uh, particularly with reference to voting, they overturned the Civil Rights Era Voting Rights Act in 2013, the Supreme Court,
Wow.
so that a lot of people are disenfranchised.
Yes.
They'll show the figures for the election results and say, oh, 35% voted Democrat, 40% Republican, or whatever it is, and the rest just couldn't be bothered to vote. But many of those people are not able to vote,
Yes. Yes.
and it's particularly people of color and minorities or students who get struck from the electoral register.
I didn't knew that about the students. I knew that about the people of color, and I remember
Yeah.
something that I saw. I think in the show with John Oliver, gerrymandering, is that the name of
Yes.
the what they
Yes.
use to redefine the electoral districts in such
Yes.
a crafty way that
Yeah.
we end up with this kind of terrible
Yeah.
results.
So with the students, it's because they perhaps live in another state, and they just make it very difficult to register there. And if they don't get the vote where their parents live, then they miss the chance to vote. And it's subtle in many ways, but they just make it much more difficult to vote, and get rid of voting stations on a campus, for instance. They're
Oh,
allowed to do that. Uh,
wow.
so the person has to travel to the other side of the city to go vote, and maybe they work there's no holiday on election day, which they
Really?
probably
We have
no.
we have a holiday. Wow. And we have,
Yeah,
I don't know if this is good or bad, but we have obligatory vote. So if you don't vote, you get a fine. So
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, it's the opposite here. They just try and put all the barriers in the way to stop you voting.
Wow, I didn't knew those details. Thank you so much for telling me. I don't know if you saw a video that the comedian Jonathan Pye did after the elections, where he mentions in a very funny, if somewhat a tragic way, all the mistakes that the Kamala Harris campaign did. Uh, I,
Yeah.
I will share it because I just saw it yesterday. A friend,
Oh,
a
okay.
journalist friend, sent that to me. I didn't knew that because I didn't follow the campaign. Did you follow
Yeah.
it?
No, I didn't. I didn't see that, but yeah, they made a lot of mistakes, I think, as well. So that's definitely part of it as well.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm so sorry because I remember because most of the information I get from the political system of the USA, I get them from the Daily Show, I get it from
Oh yeah,
Seth
yeah,
Meyers and all the commentaries because it's easier for us outside the USA to process in the funny
yeah,
in a
yeah.
funny way. So I remember that in a segment, Jon Stewart was mentioning because there has been some theories after the fact that say that the Harris campaign was too woke. And
Yeah,
Jon Stewart said, look, she was campaigning with Dick Cheney and bragged about
yeah.
having a
Oh God, yeah,
handgun. So
yeah,
that's not real.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. I mean that it's the typical mistake of the Democrats. Hillary Clinton was the same, trying to pretend to be more tough on immigration or more supporting of the military, and if people want that, they're going to vote the Republicans because they are the original hardline party. They're never going to win trying to be more Republican than the Republicans, but
And
they don't seem to get it.
yeah, and that happens in other countries. I don't know if it's in the UK, but when the far right start to rise, all the other, I don't know, centrists, they say, no, we're going to be tough on immigration, and we're going to be
Yeah,
tough on crime and tough on this and that. And in the end, they end up governing, even if they're leftist, they end up governing with the policies of the opponent. If
yeah, they get dragged. It drags the whole spectrum to the
the whole
right.
spectrum to the right. So I wish that the inverse phenomenon will go like
Yeah,
if we get
yeah,
more people like I don't know in South America in Uruguay they had a very popular president called Jose Mujica and he was loved and he's still loved and even he did some talks with Noam Chomsky so it's a
yeah,
very good one so
yeah.
oh, I was going to ask you because I don't want to be all the conversation talking about the elections. It's a depressing
No.
fact. But it seems to me that the Democratic Party didn't recognize the economic hardship that many Americans have suffered in the recent years. So the economic factor was also important.
Oh yes, yeah. That's the other major factor. They just initially when they should have got rid of Joe Biden like a year ago or longer, and but whatever. Uh, but yeah, initially when Kamala Harris came out, she was mentioning the economy and inflation, and then all the money from the billionaires started coming in. They get a lot of small dollar donations as well, but very quickly the billionaire money came in and she pivoted to the right, and that was the mistake, and away from populist working class concerns.
So sorry to hear that because I
Yeah.
think that in the Democratic Party there are possible candidates like Bernie Sanders. You went to
Oh
a
yeah,
rally
yeah.
years ago and still he feels like we need that common sense that
Yes, yes.
it,
Yes, I also went to one in 2020, a Bernie Sanders rally in
great,
Washington.
great, great,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
I'm going to ask you because well the last thing that I want to say about the election and no more Trump, because I think that the most brutal irony is that the electoral message that won the election that was most successful was of billionaires talking about dismantling a plutocracy, which will never happen. And those are
Yeah.
the themes that you also mentioned on the album. I started to investigate about what is Koch
Oh, yeah.
Industries. I have no
Oh,
idea.
yeah, Coke. They pronounce it Coke.
Oh, sorry. Coke, like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, so they're a very powerful oil refining industry, and uh, for since the 1970s, it was two of them, two brothers, but one died in 2019. David Koch died, and then Charles Koch, who was always the one who kind of pushed it, a very right-wing libertarian hardline economic policy. And they want to basically make government work for them,
Yes.
so they don't get penalized for pollute. They're one of the biggest polluters, and he has spent millions of dollars, probably billions by now, trying to fix the political system. And since 2003, he has these conventions where it's other billionaires and multimillionaires, and they all put money in, and they finance everything from, college programs to,
Wow.
they have hundreds of professors and college programs teaching the hardline economics, the free market, but it's all based on the myth, really. The idea that neoliberal free market economics makes people free or solves everyone's problems
Yes.
when it does the opposite. And, particularly because his main business is fossil fuel, uh, he's campaigned all his life to prevent any legislation that would regulate fossil fuel. And everybody knows the damage that's doing to the planet and the environment.
But that's the question that I would like to ask you. Everybody knows because it seems that some people in the USA, there are people who don't believe, they don't believe in COVID, they don't believe
Oh
in
yeah.
global
So yeah,
warming. Like, I'm worried. I'm really worried.
yeah. So that is the trick, and it is a trick. If you ask some Trump voters, they will say, "Yeah, I think the climate is changing," but when they go and vote, they are motivated by other things, which, the Charles Koch's think tanks and other billionaire think tanks promote, these crazy ideas that, oh, it's an American's right to burn gasoline, and if you take that away, you're taking away all my freedom, and it's all a socialist plot. So they hype up all these culture war kind of issues, and because it seems to motivate people or enough people to vote, for their candidates. It's crazy how it exists, and it's partly because, the news in America follows that, even if it's like a liberal kind of cable news channel, it's like they get dragged along with it, reporting, you know, I don't know, just crazy stuff about
Yes.
uh, that doesn't really affect people's lives. They had a big thing like, I don't know if you know Dr. Seuss, the children's
Yes.
author.
Yes, I know. I know.
Some of his old books contained racist language, and the family, Dr. Seuss's family who survived, his children or grandchildren, one of us, said, "Well, we want to take those books and not sell them. It's like three or four books.
Okay.
We're not going to censor the books. We're just not going to print them anymore." And there was a huge, Fox News. It was like, "Oh, Dr.
Ah,
Seuss, we're
now
canceling
I
Dr. Seuss."
remember. I remember the
Yeah,
uproar, like all the
yeah, and
liberals trying to,
they make an
and
uproar.
they invert the equation because when they are in power, they are very good at censor
Oh yeah,
funny
yeah,
books. So we say,
yeah,
oh my,
yeah. Yeah, the Florida Republican Governor DeSantis and Texas, they're banning books from school libraries and
yes,
pretending to be the party of freedom. So these is, because these things are given more publicity than, say, the fact that both ordinary Democratic working class voters and Republican voters, for instance, want paid family leave, just actual things that affect people's lives, or a minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, which hasn't been raised since 2007.
wow,
They don't, it has support across both parties' voters, but neither party will, vote for it. So that the politicians of both sides don't represent the ordinary people.
yeah. Thank you
Uh,
so much for explaining me that because from the outside you don't understand very well saying how people can vote for this monster. I don't know. Then you start to
yeah.
because sometimes it's very hard. There are some people on the left that say, oh, if they voted for Trump, they must be racist, they must be ignorant. And sometimes you have to listen what they're saying because sometimes those people have the same hatred for the system, but
Yes.
the billionaires are very clever and they take all that rage all that hatred and say, no, it's the fault of the Venezuelan people who are coming to eat your pets or
Oh yeah,
some,
yeah.
no, Haitian, sorry. But those
Yeah.
myths that we say, how people can buy that? Well, they do. And I was thinking something that you mentioned before about the books behind you, because one of the great things about Chumbawamba for people like me, and I think that for other friends, is that you recommended a lot of books on your albums, on their
Oh yeah,
website, and the website,
yeah.
and those reviews made us discover movies and films and writers. So thank you very much for that, because it opened a world that usually you don't get when you listen to, I don't know, Phil Collins or something like
Yeah.
that.
And I think it's because, when we first, I was 17, 16, 17 when the Sex Pistols came along in England, and the anarchy in the UK, and we thought this is great energy. And then we met, we lived in a town, Burnley, in northern England, and we found out there was a Burnley anarchist group, and it was
Ah,
like three people. And they were also into punk, so they were a little bit older than us, but they recommended books and pamphlets, or they had pamphlets about Malatesta or anarchism, and so that's how we discovered what anarchism was. So the music kind of opened a door, but
yes.
when you went through the door, there were people who actually knew about anarchism as it had existed historically.
I understand, and thank you so much for all that wonderful uh, information that you gave us with the new album. It's like I'm going to have to listen to it again with the lyrics, because I
Yeah,
didn't knew that it was a double album, so I left it sounding. Oh, it's like a Husker Du double album, or the Minutemen, like those very long. But it was great because the music is very eclectic. Also, it's, I don't know if how to say this, but it's very Chumbawamba. It's like the closer you
yeah,
will get to a Chumbawamba reunion. So,
yeah. So yeah, Neil plays bass and Harry plays drum, Harry Hamer.
ah,
And then on some of the sample bits, Boff and Maeve are on there just a little bit. But
okay, okay,
Harry
okay.
and Neil, I think we did about 9 songs together, and I hadn't played with them since the early 2000s, so that was really cool.
So
Uh,
now there are no barriers. Like you can someday say, okay, can we do a song from Seattle, and then you can do it the other parts on the on the UK, right? It's not that
so
complicated.
no, I actually, because my I'm going in December, well, in a couple of weeks to England. So I go back every now and then, and so I went back and we recorded those tracks. So really to capture the bass and drums in Bradford, uh, next to Leeds, and then then you can bring those files back on a hard drive, and
I
plug them in
understand.
Seattle, and then we added other instruments and the proper vocals and everything.
Um, I would like to move to a slightly related topic. Next year
Okay.
will be the 40 years, the 4 decades since the release of the debut EP of Chumbawamba, Revolution. This
Oh
is
yeah,
the copy I brought from the UK.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So
preparing all the question, I was listening to all Chumbas
yeah.
and even today, I still find like you quote some writer or some
Oh,
artist,
okay.
and it's so great. And I don't know if this is going to sound strange, but hear me out. Listen to that. I understood that it was recorded after the end of the miners' strike. So it's such a wonderful music and powerful statement that was produced when Thatcher seemed to reign supreme, like having
Yeah,
beaten down all the internal opposition. And it made me feel a little bit better, because in those moments of adversity, you can create great art and you can be inspired and inspire other people. So I wanted to ask you, what do you remember about recording those songs from Revolution?
so it's funny because at the moment we're having Zoom meetings amongst the members of Chumbawamba because we're making a book, mostly a graphic book,
Wow.
about the history of Chumbawamba. So we're talking about some of these older We start at the beginning and we're going forward. So
There is
we were
there is
talking about
another there is
yeah
another one I'm going to mention. Yeah, beautiful.
we were talking about these probably a couple of weeks ago actually. And we just did it in one day, and
Wow.
we I don't know because we'd been a band for like 3 years and we'd put out cassette demos and one thing and another. And somebody had recommended the studio, and Neil was the engineer. It was his studio. We'd never met him until we went to record that EP. And he was just super good at being an engineer and translating what we wanted to try and do and capturing it on record. Uh, and me and Harry were like, because it was the day before. Oh no, it was the same day that I don't know if you know Margaret Thatcher as well as attacking the miners.
Ye-
She attacked the Stonehenge Festival.
Yes, yes. Searching for information about the recording, I found the battle bean something like that.
The Battle of the Beanfield. So that occurred on the same day as we recorded that, and there was kind of a rumor that some confrontation was going to happen. So we were planning to go there anyway, and me and Harry went the next day and found all these people who their buses and vans had been trashed and people had been beaten up by the riot cops. So it really was recorded in a time when the state was being employed by the powerful interests to attack, and especially the trade unions to really uh, undermine and try and destabilize and just get rid of trade unionism as a thing that had helped ordinary people. And it's funny, one of the songs on Kochtopus's Garden, the first song on the second disc, when push comes to shove, is inspired by our experiences partly as Chumbawamba at that time supporting the miners' strike. We did benefit gigs, and I think it was the first time we met the Mekons doing a
Yes.
benefit gig for miners, even though we'd seen them play. Uh, and we became part of a support group for a coal mine in southern Yorkshire, and we got invited to a picket line. They had picket lines every day, but every so often they'd invite all the supporters. And it was January 1985. And we went on the Sunday night and went to a miners' club, and there was music and cheap beer. And then we went to a miner's house to sleep. And he said, "I'm sorry, there's no couch or TV. We had to sell it, because we're running out of strike funds." And then we get up at 5 in the morning to go to the picket line. There's thousands of people outside the coal mine at the front gate on one side of the road, and on the other side, thousands of riot police. And it's before cell phones and everything. And then so they have runners who are watching the street, and it's dark and snowing a little bit. And they send the word up the line that the buses are coming with the scab labour who are going to try and drive into the mine at the front. And then the shout goes up, push, shove, and suddenly, from being across the street from the police, we're face to face pushing, blocking the road, and so the buses can't get in.
Wow.
And it was mostly symbolic because the next day there was probably only 100 miners picketing, and the buses easily get in. But it, especially with what's happening now in the US, with trade unions are beginning to become more popular, like Starbucks or Amazon are forming unions, and it's coming from the bottom. It's not the union leadership. It's just ordinary workers who are like, we've had enough, and there's a whole wave of unionization going on across the US,
That is
and I
true.
think that is one of the big hopes for the future that will continue because that kind of uh, organization is is one of the few things that can actually force governments to listen to working people.
Before I show you this split that you
Oh
did,
yeah.
and as a journalist, an interesting fact that I rediscovered is that you were mentioning the struggles in countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador during the Thatcher Reagan years.
Yes.
You recommended great books that we spoke before. Um, Also, before the internet, the band was using lyrics and leaflets to communicate ideas and views that were not present in the mainstream media.
Yes. So yeah, before the internet, that was a huge part of what we did, and it was probably just maybe around that time we met the X from Holland, the Dutch band, and we did tours with them, and they were doing very similar things. And even we'd go play in other countries, and people would translate the lyrics into German or French, and we would give those out at concerts, and it seemed like a much better way of supplementing the performance. As I mean, we did what we did on stage, and the music and the theater, but also if we had leaflets or somebody from an anarchist group came and had a bookstall at the show at the gig, it just gave it more context, of who we were and what we were trying to do. I think it was always part of it, and the album sleeves reflect that as well. I think the record
Um,
sleeves.
I'm going to mention that this year, 2024, marks the 30th, I hope that I pronounced that right, anniversary of the Chumbawamba album Anarchy from 1994. And I
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
connect that to what we were mentioning right now, because you sang in it a song called Love Me, where you
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
Victor Jara and Philox. I don't
Yes.
know if you knew that they were friends and that Och
Yes.
visited Chile. Thank you. Before
Yes.
the coup d'etat of 1973. Did you
Yeah.
wrote the lyrics of that song?
Uh, some of them, yes, yes. Because I was into, I had some. I also played solo, and a couple of people, old hippies. I don't want to denigrate them, but they were, old too old at
You
the
can
time.
call them hippies. I have friends
Yeah,
who
yeah,
are hippie and they're happy to be
yeah,
hippies.
yeah. And they said, "Oh, you sound like Phil Oakes," and I had no idea who Phil Oakes was. So I went and got, I think it was CDs were around then. So I got a couple of Phil Oakes CDs, and he mentions Victor Hara, and that's how I found out about.
Great, great.
Yes, and just while I'm on it, another interesting fact that Charles Koch, the Kochtopus
Yes,
garden,
yes, the evil one, the evil.
yeah, he sponsored professors, hardline economic right-wing professors, and one of them, there were many U.S. professors came to Chile to impose neoliberalism, but the one in particular that Koch was aligned with, uh, James Buchanan. Uh, and there's this book which
Wow.
tells the story. And
I'm
so
going to
James Buchanan came
I'm
to
going to
Chile.
search for that book. Seems very interesting. Seems.
Yeah, he came to Chile. He was invited to Chile by, uh, what's it, Pinochet's team of government people to help draft the constitution in Chile,
Yeah,
which still today is.
the one that we couldn't change. Damn it.
Yeah, and that's why it's called democracy in chains. And
Yes.
Charles Koch wants to bring that model to the USA, where
Ah,
the constitution is controlled by the oligarchs.
yeah. So,
Uh,
because there are some parallels between what happened here in Chile during the 80s on the Pinochet dictatorship and what was happening with Reagan in the US and
yes,
Thatcher. And we
yes,
are like those, it was like a laboratory of ideas, of perverse
yes,
ideas, and now it's global, it's everywhere.
yes,
So
exactly.
I wanted, because you were all we were talking about books. I love books, and I don't know if you heard about this writer. He died some years ago. His name is Eduardo Galeano. You can find the books on Aca Press in English. Uh,
Oh yeah,
he's very good because I was reminded of this one because on the pictures of starving children, you select some books and say, read this.
yeah,
And then I had forgotten, like 20 years, I
yeah.
have say,
Oh
wow,
yeah,
this is like some ideas of these writers are very similar to what Galeano wrote. So it's very good, very poetic. The X
yeah,
did a song on an album called Starters Alternators. I don't remember the name of the song. I'm not that nerd,
yeah.
but it's a poetry. It's a poetry of Eduardo Galeano. So
Oh
I'm going to
okay,
send you the name because
okay, yeah, definitely, yeah,
it's
yeah,
very good. And I wanted to move. Well, if I were to recommend a starting point for the Chumbawamba discography, it will be perhaps the live LP Show Business, which I
oh
have
yeah,
here on tape.
yeah,
and
yeah.
also, and also this compilation, cassettes are easier to show than
Yes,
vinyl.
yes,
So,
yeah.
but I was investigating, and recently I realized that many of the release of the band are out of print. You mentioned before a book.
Yes.
Will uh, some of the early albums or the albums from the 90s be available someday? Is it
Yes, yes. So we have just made a new deal. You know, the American company Republic, or they're part of Universal, so it's the big company. But they had the big album and the couple of albums after. So we've been able to get all the albums apart from the one album. So they're all in the same place now. So they've just started putting them on. They were on Spotify, but they've rejigged it on Spotify and the other digital platforms, and the plan is to release them on vinyl, I believe.
wow, great, because
Yeah.
I I have some that I brought from the UK. I have pictures,
Oh yeah,
picture.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
was checking, and also this one, the vinyls are on the other room because I
yeah.
don't want them flying around. So, but I was looking at the prices that they are selling,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's insane. It's really
yeah,
insane. So it's sad
yeah,
because this music, we need more people knowing the lyrics of Enough is Enough and
yeah,
the day the Nazi died. This is the
yeah,
Chumbawamba moment.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
So
So
hopefully that will begin happening next year, I believe. That's the plan.
yes, thank you so much. That is a great idea. Well, I try to, I don't know if you are okay with this, but I try to, if people ask me, do you have that album? Yeah, I'm going to record that, no problem, because that's how I got into punk.
Yeah.
There were no
Oh yeah.
punk independent music stores. I only knew Crash like in the year 2000. So because
Yeah.
it wasn't possible, you could only buy cassettes of in Chile of the Ramones and the Clash
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
were multinationals. So when the
Yeah.
people start to saying, "Oh, the multinational, blah blah blah," I
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because, and I really hope that someone in the USA got tap tamping the album and got some ideas from, I don't know, Emma Goldman or
I
someone
think so,
else.
yeah. We have
Oh,
had letters because when that came out, we had a punk audience, but it suddenly expanded, and we came to do a tour in I think spring 1998, and suddenly there were all these young kids, often with the parents, coming to the gigs because they knew the big song. And years later, we got letters or emails of people saying, "Oh, I was like 13 when that, came out, and I had no idea." And I've just recently gone and listened to the album, the whole album again, and there's all these other things there which are, uh, inspiring or whatever.
Yeah, and also there is, I'm sorry to say this, but Chumbawamba is vintage at this moment. So you can profit not only because of the money, because you can profit because those ideas are ready to be, I don't know, I think that all these, I'm going to read some a question because it's complicated, this idea. In
Yes,
times
okay.
when mainstream voters are supporting candidates who define themselves as right-wing libertarians or anarcho-capitalists, like the president of Argentina, I think that it's important to present alternative ideas based on compassion and empathy. I personally think that political ideas are like a toolbox. You can use the
Yes.
ones that are still useful, and you can leave behind those that are no longer valid. Valid, sorry.
Yes.
This brings me to to the big question of the circle A, anarchism, and the common
Yes.
perception that people have of anarchists based on the stereotype of the bomb throwers of the 19th century and the black
Yeah.
bloc. But in 2010, you published a book called Three
Oh,
Dead
yes.
Princes, an
Yes.
anarchist fairy tale. And I read somewhere that it was inspired by Piotr Kropotkin ideas. So I wanted to ask you if you have you can summarize your interpretation of what mutual aid is and how it can help us today with challenges like global warming. Sorry.
Oh, yes. So, yeah. So the that book, yeah, it was inspired by Kropotkin, who was also a scientist, and he traveled around and looked at indigenous cultures or cultures that were very far removed from, urban centers, and he witnessed that they operated on, principles of mutual aid. Uh, and but also, I read some books about human evolution, and there's since the 1970s, the discovery, or the the body of knowledge is moving towards the idea that humans, Homo sapiens, existed as hunter-gatherers or whatever for tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, operating on the same kind of principles. They call it fierce egalitarianism, where you're part of a band of people and you all have to pull together for the good of the group, and share the food equally. And nobody is the leader. It's like a group community. And people who look at human evolution, and the Three Dead Princes goes into this, the afterword. We basically survived as a species because we learned how to cooperate, uh, to bring up children, because by a quirk of evolution, our brains were getting bigger and we were on two legs. And for the female, the pelvis can only be a certain uh, size if you're on two legs. So they call it literally an evolutionary bottleneck. And as the baby's brains were bigger, they couldn't fit through unless they were born earlier and more helpless. So that had the effect that the group had to, spend more time being able to raise this helpless baby in the wild, uh, and it made the group more cooperative. And that's the origin of humanity, if you like. And out of that, maybe language evolved, and certainly, the fact that we have eye whites that you can see, so we attract each other's attention. Uh, Whereas all the other mammals, they have a darker area because they're either trying to hide from a predator or they are a predator. So it's even written in our face.
Please, if you have literature available that you can recommend me about those issues, please let me know the name of the writers.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh, here we
because
go. This
seems
one.
something very I had no idea. I'm going to
Yeah, this
recognize
one.
my.
Uh, so he also talks about Kropotkin, but he talks about human groups.
Ah, yeah, because people say like anarchism is just smashing windows and
Oh
breaking
yeah.
things, And it's we have to recognize there is some of that. It's like when they say punk is only bad music played in squats. Yeah,
Yeah.
guilty, guilty. We all been to squats, but it's so much more. It can be so much more. And I think that this is the right moment to understand that, because if we keep going in the direction of, um, I don't know, of Elon Musk, we're doomed. We're really
Yes,
doomed.
yes, yes.
We have to.
Yeah, so I think, you're right. The moment, anarchism as mutual aid is, and I live in a rural area in the United States, and we get serious wildfire season. And two times, I've had to evacuate when the wildfires come.
I saw an interview where you describe it's like just miles away from where you live.
Yeah.
Some firefighters died,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the same year
Yeah.
that happened in the north of the USA, it happened in the south of Chile. It was
Yes.
like they used to how the pines, the tree pines, they they
Hmm.
they will get all the hills covered with pines, and that is
Yeah.
to export chips. They call
Yeah.
it chips. It's like something I don't remember the name in English, sorry, but they export that wood to Asia. So
Yeah.
it was all that an accident waiting to happen, and all the
Yeah.
hills burned around very near the town my dad lives in the rural
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
and the wind changed like in the down, so he saved the house. So
Yeah.
I felt very, oh, this is happening in all the countries of the world. So
It is.
in
Yeah. And
Australia also.
yes. And the only really positive thing that has come from that is that when that happens, people do naturally, it doesn't matter because where I live, there is the whole spectrum of uh, political thought amongst just ordinary people. We live in a town which is probably more liberal, but the county votes for Trump. And so and I've taught in the high school doing theatre. And some of the parents are obviously Christian nationalist
I
kind of
was going to
people.
ask you about that. Thank you for us. Yeah, the
Well,
demographics.
yeah, yeah. So we have the whole spectrum. It's interesting because there's a progressive element which you don't get in a lot of rural towns. That it's unusual in that way. Uh, and but when the wildfires happen, everybody, and it's a small town, so people know each other. Uh, the people do work together in like a mutual aid way
Yes.
because it's being forced on us by this wildfire. So people are trying to help each other out, and it doesn't really matter what your politics are if you're trying to get away from a fire or you're trying to save a building. Um, so in that instance, so
It's like a
that was,
silver lining, like you. I don't know if silver
yes,
lining is the right. Yeah,
yeah, well, maybe. I mean, it just we just have to try and translate that to the whole planet because the whole planet is under
yeah,
threat.
because people don't understand that it's an emergency that is happening now. It's
Yes.
like yes. I'm going to end with a couple of questions. Well, maybe three if I get the time right.
Okay.
Because I will try to publish the translated interview between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And I was
Yeah.
thinking that in a Christmas gig that Chumbawamba did in the 1 in 12 in the 1 in 12 club called
Yeah.
A Night of Punk Nostalgia. I think it was in
Yes.
1988, playing
Yes.
covers of songs by the Sex Pistols, the Buzzcocks, Sham 69, and many more.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that gig and talking about punk nostalgia? Punk nostalgia. Did you have the chance to see Crash and the Dead Kennedys in the early 80s?
Uh, we did see Crass a few times.
Ah, you saw them.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'd say like 4 or 5 times, I think. Uh,
More times than me.
yeah, I never saw Dead Kennedys, but I did see Jello Biafra doing some of his solo performance,
Ah, okay.
and we performed with him in San Francisco one
Yes.
time. Uh, And as regards the punk, I don't know. We just thought it'd just be because we haven't really talked about this, but Chumbawamba also have a great sense of humor, and we tried to, in the concerts, in the performances, we tried to, make that, especially, after the initial few years, we tried to bring that to the performance, the sense of humor. And I think we just thought it would be a really good laugh to do it, because
I
we
I
grew up with
heard
those
a
songs.
recording, a very rough recording of that
Yeah,
night, and
and that,
it's so much fun. I think that the
yeah,
copy that is available on YouTube was done after I did the digitalization of my
yeah,
CD. And it's funny because people start asking songs by the exploited, and you say, "What the? What not exploited?"
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
like a routine, a
yeah.
funny punk humor.
And it's funny, we learned, there's some live versions of those tracks. So we learned the sort of little bits of speaking in between the songs, that were on some of the live recordings of the original artists doing those. And people loved it. It was just like a really fun kind of experience. And at that time, in England, in England now they have this phenomenon, and in the US, of tribute bands. So it's bands who,
Yes,
they'll have a name
yes.
like the
But
Spin, the
the
Autumn.
funny thing, at least for me, is that I know that you are like modest people, but you play well. You play better.
Oh,
So in some
yeah,
parts, like wow, this is how it should have been. The
yeah,
bassist Maeve is great. I always
yeah.
I haven't spoke to him in years, but it was very nice to meet him through Facebook, and he's a really great
Oh, yeah,
bassist and trumpet player
yeah, yeah,
also. Oh,
yeah,
I'm going to end with something more something related to punk, to the punk roots of the band, because Chumbawamba had a tradition of slagging off left-wing artists like Billy Bragg, the House
oh,
Martins, the Redskins, and the Manic Street Preachers. Bands that I like, but I understand the criticism.
yeah,
I remember reading a chapter in a book about the last years of the Clash, about the time Joe Strummer went basking to the north of England, and you received him
yeah,
with some red painting. Can you tell us a bit more about that
yeah,
art attack? Oh, sorry.
yeah,
This is
yeah. So they,
we have to show the
oh yes, yeah. So, in the early years, the 1980s, I'd say we were more, I don't know what the word is, maybe a bit too righteous, and so yeah, the Clash came, and we just got word of mouth that day they were going to appear, because I guess this band, the Alarm, it was their gig they were playing. So the Clash were busking outside as the people were going into the. So we
they
got
were
this idea.
sabotaging one gig and you sabotaged theirs.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's
So,
fantastic. It's funny.
yeah, and we just uh I don't know, we just had this, like they have the plastic ones now. It was an old-fashioned metal thing that you use in a garden to spray the plants so they don't get the bugs on them.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. I know.
And we
I know
put
that thing. And you
red
use
paint.
that. That's what you use. Because I was
Yeah,
because paint is very hard to shoot.
yes. And it shoots as you suck it and as you push it, so it's just like a constant jet.
So you
And
got
it was
near them. You got really near them and
probably like 20 feet, and did it a couple of times, and then the crowd reacted, and I got chased away
did you
because I was the
and you
one.
survive and you survive.
Yeah, I got away. I was a good runner then.
You run
Uh,
fast.
and it was, we'd done a pamphlet called Dirty Fingers in Dirty Pies, and it was about record companies who were also part of multinationals who had arms manufacturers,
Yes.
particularly at that time, EMI, who
Sorry, am I?
ironically later we signed with. Yeah. But at that point, when we signed, they didn't have an arms, uh, uh, manufacturing
Yeah. And the
elsewhere.
clash what the clash was with CBS. I don't
CBS,
remember.
yeah. And I think, there was very loose information that I don't think they had an arms wing. I think we printed it. You know, some fanzines printed it and we reprinted it. But I never found a proper, you know, now I'm more of a scholar. I would be suspect of our line of inquiry there. But they were definitely in South Africa, you know, not that the
Ah,
Clash went to South
yeah.
Africa, but all those record labels were very big in the apartheid regime in South Africa. So it was kind of that punk resistance to corporate uh you know,
I,
the corporations were just embroiled in regimes
apartheid.
that, yeah,
Is that the word? That's how you pronounce it? Apartheid? Apartheid?
apartheid, yeah,
Apartheid.
yeah,
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you because this is a trivia a trivia question of two
yeah.
parts. I
Okay.
was checking some of the interviews you have done in the recent years, and you mentioned that you had the chance to see Joy Division live in Manchester.
Yeah. So we grew up in a town that is 25 miles from Manchester, and you could get a bus to Manchester, and there was a late bus back on the weekends. And we were just born at the right time, you know, because we were very into the Fall, the Manchester band, and
Yes.
there was a like a mini festival of Manchester bands, and Joy Division played at, and the
Ah,
Fall, and Buzzcocks. And then we saw him again. Yeah, I saw him a couple of times, Joy Division.
wow. Because I found Shane McGowan of the Pogues saw Joy Division in '79 and said that, I don't know,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this because each gig is different, but say it was like a horror film. You were scared to go to for a piece in case you missed something.
Oh,
It was
yeah. He was very
mesmerized.
intense. Yeah.
It was intense, like
Yeah,
that.
Ian
Like,
Curtis, you know, the front man, he was very intense in his performance. And it would be the same time. It was like, yeah, 1978, 1979,
wow.
1980 was that time when we were, you know, and then we moved to Leeds in 1980. So then that's how we came in the
Eh,
orbit of like Cons and Gang of Four. Uh, but yeah, we just happened to live near Manchester. So at that time,
And also with Chumbawamba, you played twice with Fugazi. Fugazi. I have
oh, yeah,
all that.
yes,
This is the 90s room where I have all the tapes and the books and the magazines. So
yes.
I wanted to ask you because I read somewhere that you met Ian Mackay when he went to Leeds in '87. Like not you, but the band. That's how
Yeah.
you became friends.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had a friend in Leeds who he lived pretty close actually, and somehow I can't remember how Ian Mackay was there, and uh, he was doing some recording with our friend, and so they just stopped by the house for a cup of tea, you know, and we said hello and like,
Ah. And you have never
uh,
met him before because this was pre-internet. Like this is Ian
yeah,
from at that time was Ian from Minor Threat. Not
I can't remember. Yeah, maybe, yeah, I think it might have been before Fugazi, and then Fugazi came out, and I don't remember how that connection came about, but it felt like a very natural connection to us that we would play with them in England and we played with them in Ireland as well. And in
is that the gig
Washington.
where Alice threw the condoms?
Yes, yes.
Because
And then
she
we also played with them in Washington, DC and stayed at the Discord house.
It's because I read this is like this is the nerd part of me. I read that in DC you play with Fugazi and a band from the Basque country called Negugorriak. I remember
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's been like 3 decades, so you don't have to remember. And also in on the Henry Rollins show, he does a show very good, very eclectic in music. So he's presenting
Oh yeah.
songs of jazz and things. I discovered jazz and
Yeah.
soul through his radio show, and he mentioned
Yeah.
that Ian went to Leeds to record the first album of the Rollins band, and during the recordings they had
Yes.
a faulty microphone, And I don't remember the details, but he said something like, and then we went to the house of a band called Chumbawamba, and we got like
Yeah.
a loaned a microphone, and that
Yeah.
microphone was used on the album. That's all the
Yeah.
trivia I have. I'm empty now, so
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time, for your ideas, your inspiration. On the last episode, 30 episode of, I don't know, I don't know how to pronounce it, when you have 30, how do you say the number 30?
The 50th. The
Thank you.
50th.
30th episode
Yeah.
of my online radio show. I play a song from the your last album. It's really good.
Yeah.
The album really, I love it. I really love it. So if you have anything
Yeah.
to promote, please let me know. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a
Yeah.
great
Thanks,
Sunday.
Carlos. Yeah.
Bye.
You too. Great. Yeah. Bye.